This is Mike Kegley here with Brad Sturdy, Larry Smith, and we have on Mike Farrell. Of course, you can read the Farrell Files, Illinois, on IlliniGuys.com. That's a subscriber only column. Great reason alone to subscribe to our site is the insight that you get from Mike Farrell. Mike, thanks for coming on the show today. And before we get started, tell everybody about your site and where they can get even more recruiting information for those people who are addicted to college football recruiting.
Yeah, MikeFarrellSports.com, at MFarrellSports on Twitter. Just a lot of content, not just recruiting, but everything college football. You know, you're going to find obviously a lot more Illinois-centric stuff on Illini Guys by far. We'll mention Illinois every once in a while here and there, but we got a couple Illini guys on our staff, so they keep us informed on what's going on with Illinois, which is always good.
Perfect. And I can't tell you enough to go to that site. He does a wonderful job. And of course, when you are the guy who kind of invented recruiting websites, there's a certain level of expertise you get from Mike. And now we're going to focus on that 2025 class. Now there may be some jockeying around, but Illinois has a class that is 13 commits. They have some talent in there. Can you talk about the class overall, and then maybe we can talk about a few of the guys that you look at and you say, this guy might be better than what people think?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk to the what they wanted to do coming in. They wanted to improve, depth at offensive line. They wanted to continue the momentum at wide receiver. They wanted to obviously, shore up the defensive back room, but most importantly, keep the quarterback train going. They've done a good job. They've relied on transfers for so long at the quarterback position that they want to, begin to develop guys. And they think the last 3 years, and including this year with Carson Boyd, they've done a good job of, getting guys that I think are developmental players that they can, groom from within the program and not have to go out and rely on the portal, which is a guy coming in, let's learn a whole new offense, whole new set of teammates, all that stuff. You need to have that culture at quarterback. So that's, I think, the biggest thing. Deshaun Newton's going to get a shot at quarterback. I don't play quarterback, but and just get more athletic. So they've done a good job there. They struck out early at defensive line, and that's a little bit area of concern for me in the class, even though they got a couple guys. They took some shots at some big name guys and they whiffed. And that's okay. That happens. But I think for the most part, you won't see this class ranked very highly. It's a lot of guys that people slap 3 stars on. There's a couple guys in here that I think are 4-star caliber players that probably won't be ranked that way, or maybe on one service will rank them that way, simply because what happens is anytime somebody commits to an Illinois or a Northwestern or a Minnesota, they'll slap 3 on them and they'll never bump them up to 4. Or if they were a 4, they'll drop them down to 3. It's just the way it is. It's not a big enough program. It's not a big enough fan base. It's not a big enough. So the rankings, I wouldn't really base that on. Bielema is a good talent evaluator. He's a little stubborn in what he likes. And this class has a little bit of that as well. But it's not a bad class. It's a good class when you're talking about Bielema upgrading the talent level since he's been there. The problem is, are they upgrading versus an expanded Big Ten? And so with their upgrade in talent, they're probably still treading water because the Big Ten has added a lot of, power programs.
When you look at recruiting, how important is it now that Nick Saban is retired, Brett Bielema can go out to offensive linemen and say, I've gotten more people in the NFL than anyone has. And the second corollary or follow-up to that question is, if I'm an offensive lineman, I'm going to look at that number of offensive linemen that Bielema's put into the NFL, and I'm going to know they weren't 5 stars. Wouldn't there be a logical attraction to say this guy knows how to get guys into the NFL? Or is today's world, is there just so many other factors that can overcome that?
It works. It's definitely a selling point. It works in the portal. It works at JUCO level, and it works at the high school level. The biggest problem we have in this day and age is you can get a kid like Dennis, and he just leaves, and it's not his fault. I
Right.
mean, he was originally committed to Michigan State. Mel Tucker, the whole thing falls apart. He chooses Illinois, and then he becomes homesick, and his family situation where he wants to be closer to home, and he's gone. And I mean, that's happening more and more because the portal is so accessible. In the old days, he would have had to ask for his release, and they would have said you could only go to certain schools, and they would have restricted what schools he could go to. All of it completely unfair because coaches can leave tomorrow anytime they want, and kids
Right.
can't. But in the old days, it was easier to develop players, especially offensive linemen like that, because you could make them stay, or they would have to work through homesickness or family situations because they didn't really have a choice. They would have to sit out a year. Now they can just leave. And so the selling point is there. Now they're not going to get 5 and 4 star offensive linemen. They're going to get the high threes, some low fours, some that are twos that I think are, better than that. But he's got to focus on the guys that he likes. And Bielema is more about effort and intensity and motor and all that stuff than he is about actual physical talent. He wants kids that are 6'7", 305 with great feet, of course, but it's more about your intensity and versatility too. So, long answer made short. It's a good selling point. It's against teams of similar ilk. You're not going to win a recruiting battle with Florida or Florida State or Michigan or Notre Dame because of that statistic. But you will maybe win one over Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin because of that statistic. And that's what you have to do. Those are the teams you have to beat for kids because you're not in the 5-star business.
Defensive line has been a challenge for recruiting. Been a little surprising for us following him because, again, Bielema's got a good record with defensive linemen over the years. What do you think it's going to take for Illinois to break that streak and get a little more success on that defensive lineman hunt? Because that is probably the most rare commodity in all of football, it seems.
It's development and luck because, you look at some of the guys in state, 2 of the in-state defensive linemen went to Miami last year. A sexier program, an elite recruiter, Mario Cristobal, NIL, that is, better than Illinois. They lose an in-state kid to Michigan. Michigan's reigning national championship, much more traditional power. So you're going to have to develop. You're going to have to get the 3-star kids. You've got to fight for those in-state 4 stars. You just have to. You're not going to win those battles very often, but you have got to stay in it. And that's the thing I like. Bielema, back when he was at Wisconsin, he complained about Urban Meyer coming in and trying to flip kids, and he felt that there was a gentleman's agreement in the Big Ten that you didn't do that, and that no. So he learned pretty quickly about the cutthroat level of business. Then in his first year, I think he was a little conservative and not going down the line and recruiting battles with those guys. If he was in the top 8, but he felt he was 8, he would sort of punt and move on. He's staying in it now. That leads to disappointing losses in recruiting, but it's also extremely important because now the portal exists. So if you finish second or third for a kid, in a year from now, he could be coming back to you through the portal. So I think he's adapted his style that way, but it's always going to come down to any program like Illinois. You're going to get 3 stars, you got to get lucky, and you got to develop them. And Newton is a great example of that. It wasn't a highly regarded recruit. Came in, worked hard, found an opportunity to play, was developed very, very well. And then you go out and you sell his 2nd-round status to other kids and have them come in. But when you get into the 3 stars, it comes down to, are you seeing something nobody else is seeing, and are you going to get lucky? And he's going to have to get that way. I mean, there's no other way around it. You have to be a great talent evaluator and developer, and you got to get lucky.
You mentioned the quarterback position. Obviously, Trey Petty's there as a freshman this year. Behind Luke Altmaier, you've got Carson Boyd, you got Donovan Leary. So you've got a quarterback room that seems to be improving. What are your overall thoughts about what he's done with that quarterback position, which appears to me as the layman to be much deeper than what it's been for quite some time at Illinois?
Yeah, I mean they're getting solid quarterbacks who can move the pocket, who can extend the play, who aren't, true dual threats, but can be. Petty and Boyd are both guys that are pro style quarterbacks, but can run and actually were very good runners, when needed. That's important because nowadays you can't have a 6'5" guy back there who's, 210 and can't move. So that's good. They're going to lose somebody to the portal, just the way it is. Whoever doesn't start is going to be, heading elsewhere. And you have to live with that too. So, I think you have to over recruit the quarterback position these days. I think you have to, they got two in this class, Newton being one of them. I'm not saying take two every year because that leads to a bad quarterback room, but I think you have to continue to get one every year no matter what. You cannot fall off. Hope that two out of the three stay over a 3-year period. Develop them, have one emerge as a starter, the other as the backup takes over, and then just get into that rhythm and not rely on the portal anymore. So I think he's got talented enough kids where he can do that. He'll lose one, but he'll keep two, and then he'll have guys who have been in the system for 2-3 years that could take over.
One final question here at the wide receiver position. What do you expect out of Franklin coming from Old Miss? And then, of course, Illinois fans remember him from UTSA, where he literally just had a fantastic game against a very good Illinois defensive backfield that year.
The wide receiver position is probably out of all the positions since Brett Bielema has taken over that's improved the most. They now have multiple options. They've got guys who could play out of the slot who aren't, the biggest or tallest, but are excellent route runners, can get off press. They got guys on the outside who have, range, 50-50 ball guys. They've got speed, but not excessive speed, but enough speed, to get downfield, get a little bit of separation. I think it's the deepest group when it comes to Bielema improving. And it's so important because if you don't have that quarterback player, you have a quarterback who needs guys to bail him out. You need great wide receivers. Now, it's not Ohio State's receiver recruiting anything close to that. None of these guys are potential first rounders, but they're very good players and a bigger upgrade from the days of, man, we got Isaiah Williams and nothing else. What do we do? Now you got 5-6 guys that can, eventually rotate in, and it's going to be a huge difference for that defense. For that offense, especially when it's third and long and the running game isn't rolling. So I think he's done a really good job in that one area.
Folks, you can hear Mike on the Illini Guys Sports Spectacular. You can obviously read him twice a week on the IlliniGuys.com, and you can go to his website, MikeFarrellSports.com. There's just so many different ways you can access his information. Mike, thanks so much for coming on today.
All right, absolutely, anytime.
Excellent. Folks, we will be right back after these messages.